There's a story of a guy who lived about 1,700 years ago, give or take a couple hundred years. And he was raised by a Christian mother and a not-so-Christian father. In fact, his father did not believe in God. He's what we would call a pagan. He worshipped false gods. And this guy was raised mostly by his father, so he wasn't baptized as a child, and he wasn't raised to believe in any kind of God. Instead, he was sent to the finest schools to learn the ways of rhetoric, which is speaking well. Basically, he was trained to be a debater and to win debates, and he did very well at this. He was very successful. He could basically do whatever he wanted in life because he was so successful at this and so smart and intelligent. And so he did whatever he wanted in life. He spent the first 30 years of his life living a life of promiscuity, spending his money on things that he didn't need to spend his money on, chasing the finer things in life, seeking to satisfy his desires for pleasure, giving in to his sexual desires and monetary wants and whatever he wanted to do. And none of this was fulfilling to him. In fact, after these 30 years, he started to ask himself whether there was something more in life that he should be pursuing. And eventually he ran into a guy whose name was Ambrose. And Ambrose was a bishop. And Ambrose taught this guy the ways of the Christian disciple. And this guy, whose name was Augustine, he learned a lot about the Christian way and soon discovered that this was the way to live. And he had a powerful conversion, got himself baptized, was eventually named a bishop, and became one of the greatest saints the world has ever seen. His name was Saint Augustine of Hippo. And after he had his conversion, he wrote a book all about his life, his conversion story, basically, about how he was chasing the finer things, always seeking for more, trying to satisfy his desires, and all about how none of those desires were satisfied in the world, but they were only satisfied when he discovered the Lord. And so he's got this great line in this book where he says, "Oh God, you made us for yourself. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." Our hearts are restless until they rest in you. I think if we asked St. Augustine about this second reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans, he would quote that verse to us, that line to us. Our hearts are restless until they rest in you. Because all these things that St. Paul lists to the Romans, the Christians in Rome at the time, they were going through heavy persecution. Many were being killed for the faith, killed for Jesus Christ. And so he asks them, and he asks us as well. These same questions that he asks the Romans can be applied to us as well. What can separate us from the love of Christ? Anguish, distress, persecution, famine, peril, the sword, perhaps even relating it to our day, failures at work, too much homework, having to do chores at home, unemployment, cancer, death of a loved one. What can separate us from the love of Christ? St. Augustine, reading this, would probably say, if our hearts are resting in the Lord, nothing can touch us. That's exactly what St. Paul is saying. Because Jesus Christ conquered death for us, nothing can separate us from the love of Christ. All these things that he lists here are external to us. They're all outside of us, things that we can't help. If I lose my job, or if I get a huge assignment at school, I can't really help that. That's not something that I can fix. What can I fix? I can fix how I react to it. I can fix the things that I then choose that reveal what I truly love. And as baptized Christians, baptized disciples of Jesus Christ, we share in the victory of Jesus Christ. And so it doesn't matter what the world does to us, because we have the love of Christ within us. In the rite of baptism, after the child is baptized, I think it's after the child was baptized, the parents and godparents receive a candle, and they light this candle from the Easter candle, which was lit at Easter when we're celebrating the resurrection of Jesus Christ, the great victory of Jesus Christ. And after they receive the candle that's lit, they're told, parents and godparents, it is your duty that this candle be kept burning brightly. It's a sign of the flame of love that we're given when we're baptized. The flame of love, the love of Christ that dwells within us. And so we need to keep the candle burning brightly. And all of these external things that St. Paul lists, they're basically like a big gust of wind that comes and tries to blow a candle out. So if a candle is lit very dimly, it's going to easily blow out anytime suffering or persecution comes. So our job as Christian disciples is to make sure not only that the flame keeps going, but to build it up. Consider what that means. To build up a flame so that any wind can come and not blow out the flame of love in our hearts. Think of a bonfire. You're starting a fire outside. You add more and more wood to it so that the flame builds. And as it builds, pretty soon, eventually, the winds will come and it'll make the fire not go out, but make it stronger. That's our task. How do we do that? How do we make the flame of love grow stronger in our lives, in our hearts? Look at what Jesus did in the gospel. He said when he heard of the death of John the Baptist was Jesus' cousin, and he probably wasn't expecting John to be killed, because John was killed basically for calling out somebody. What did Jesus do when he heard of this great sorrow in his heart? He went and prayed with the Father. He went off to a lonely place, a deserted place, to pray with the Father. That's our call as well. Every day, to go off, to spend time in silence, where we turn off our cell phones, we turn off our TVs, our radios, our computers, everything, and we just sit with the Lord in silence for however long, 10, 15, 20, 30, an hour, however long it takes to grow that flame. And there's a great place for us to do that, actually, right here in Grand Forks. There's a place called St. Anne's, and at St. Anne's they have adoration of the Blessed Sacrament, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Why do we need to go to the Lord to grow the fire? Because the responsorial psalm says this: the hand of the Lord feeds us. He answers all of our needs. When we go to the Lord, He feeds us. He gives us what we need. That's right there in the gospel. The people who followed Jesus to his place of prayer knew that Jesus could feed them. They knew that they had needs, and Jesus would supply for their needs. And that's exactly what happened. Jesus saw them coming out of need, and he had pity on them. And so he cured their sick. He healed their illnesses. And then when they were hungry and it seemed like there was nothing left to give, he miraculously fed all of them out of 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish. The flame of love in their hearts grew that day. That's our task. Every day to spend time with the Lord in prayer. And even before that, though, every week to come to this altar and receive the very body and blood of Jesus in the Eucharist. For that is the greatest food that Jesus can give us. That is love itself. And when we receive the love of Christ in the Eucharist in a proper disposition, then our flame cannot be put out, regardless of what comes to us. In fact, sometimes we can let our flame grow so great that we might encounter suffering and persecution, and that will only become food for the flame. And the flame will grow more and more, and the joy and the peace and the love within our hearts will grow to a greater and greater extent. So my brothers and sisters, when we come to Mass every week, and then every day when we spend time, intentional time with the Lord in prayer, the entire world will be set ablaze and transformed. And soon everyone, just like St. Augustine, will come to realize that our hearts are restless until they rest in God.